First and foremost, Taz, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
We were hoping to talk to you a little bit about what we regard as sort of the future of the bar and get your perspective and what you think your peers are saying and really pick your brain, really. Let's start nice and easy. Let's talk about you, a topic you know a lot about.
Well, I hope so.
I would hope so too. So tell us a little bit about your personal journey towards becoming a barrister and just give a little bit of an introduction, please.
Yeah. So I'm Taz Al-Zaiq. I'm a criminal barrister for the Crown Prosecution Service. In my spare time, I create YouTube videos. And recently, as of August, I'm a founder of...
This video is sponsored by Lexstery, the first free online community for aspiring lawyers pursuing a legal career in England and Wales. Inside the community, you will gain access to our courses, legal career consulting programs, forum, free resources, and live events, which we run every month, covering a range of topics, including legal applications, legal interviews, advocacy events, and we host guest speakers from across the legal profession who share their tips and tricks on how to secure a training contract and pupillage. You can sign up for free at lexstery.com, and we look forward to welcoming you inside our legal community.
Which is an online community for aspiring barristers. My journey has kind of been a bit like this, all over the place, really. I went to law school, didn't really know if I was going to make a career out of it. And then really I'd finished law school, still not really sure, on the paths, a bit of energy going into being a commercial solicitor, frankly for the money, and that's being honest. Didn't really know much about the space, just thought I was just being guided by security. What can I do to make a good living out of my life? And then I finished university, went to work for a commercial law firm. Hated it, to be honest. Found myself just looking at the clock all the time. And that was kind of a good indicator that this wasn't for me, because I had friends doing it who loved it. And it's a personal thing, right? So I'd finished at the firm and I knew I don't want my career to go this way. So I left, I went and volunteered for the witness service. I did that it was meant to be a few months, ended up staying there for 12 months and just loved what I saw. That's when I knew that I wanted to be a criminal barrister, because at the time I hadn't decided really. Went and was watching trials every week, sat in the public gallery, just watching what they did, really. I hadn't really had much exposure to what the role of a barrister was. And then just watching a range of trials, murder trials, firearms trials, I'd find myself looking forward to Wednesday, which was the voluntary day. And this was kind of where the dots started to connect for me, where I was like, right, well, this is actually something I enjoy. Background-wise, I was always that guy at uni watching Law and Order. It was from an entertainment perspective as well, in the sense that it's just something I've found myself in my own time watching. Obviously, TV and real life are two very different things, but the interest was always there. And I think as I got older, what I would find myself doing before I even committed to going down the bar route, I just noticed myself, let's say I'm cooking in the kitchen, I'd have my phone up and I'd be watching criminal trials, just how American lawyers were cross-examining in court. And I just found it really interesting. I had a lot of admiration for the skill set, how someone can step into an arena, essentially, have a wealth of knowledge on a case, and then put the case. It's a real skill. And I've always had a lot of admiration for it. And when I was seeing it in person being done extremely well, I think that's when I just thought, this is the route I wanted to go. So from there, I went to volunteer for a death row office in America. Did that for 4 months. Very different from what we'd be doing in the UK, but it was all entwined in crime. And then when I came home, I wanted to do it, but truthfully, I didn't feel that I was good enough to do it at that time, because of my background. Didn't really hear much about the world of the bar at university. Came from a state school, which growing up, I didn't see that as, I didn't even know really what the difference was between a state school and a private school. I just went to school. But then as I started kind of getting more involved in this world, I started applying to places, I kind of started to see the standard that the application needed to be and what was good on an application, what was bad on an application. And that's kind of where these feelings of inadequacy started to come in for me. And then really what changed when I was like, right, I am good enough, was when I won a scholarship from Lincoln's Inn. That was kind of the first bit of positive feedback I had in the face of 5 years of applying, and even before getting to applying, just circling around whether I can do this or not, half in, half out. And then the day I got that scholarship was the first time. I remember where I was at the canteen in AG, which was Addleshaw, where I was working, and I got an email from Lincoln's Inn, and it was just like, congratulations. And I just remember the whole room just blanked out, because that was, and I'm getting goosebumps talking about it now, because that was the first bit of enthusiasm and positivity I had around, I can actually make this a reality. And then reinforcement from people and institutions whose view really mattered in this space. And long story short, I got the scholarship. It paid for the bar course, and then from the bar course, I ended up going on and securing pupillage, and here I am today, work for the Crown Prosecution Service as a criminal barrister.
That's amazing, thank you. And I think I have goosebumps too, hearing your passion about it all. And it's always so inspiring when you hear someone talk about, I wanted this and I actually got it. Like, it really sort of invigorates everybody. I'm really interested about what you said about feelings of like imposter syndrome, and how is that something you sort of tackle? What do you think are sort of key sort of tactics that you would recommend to someone when they're feeling in that same sort of position?
So my view now on imposter syndrome is very different from what it was back then. So I look at imposter syndrome now as a natural symptom of moving into a new space. So whenever you're expanding in your life, you're entering a new space, and because the new space is unfamiliar, certain feelings will arise. There can be expressions within that space from people maybe overtly telling you don't belong, and that's something different. But even if that's not there, we can have those feelings because we're expanding. So now I kind of flip imposter syndrome on its head and see it as signals that I'm expanding, and that the feelings are meant to be there. And over time, like with anything, you just acclimate. I look at imposter syndrome now as a process of acclimation. I'll have the feelings in the beginning of the journey, and then a year doing something, I will settle into it. I remember the first time going into court actually to prosecute a case, and it was an out-of-body experience. I had the wig on, I had the gown on, I looked the part, but I didn't feel in my body. And the more I've done it, and the more I've turned up to court, now I feel like I'm in the wig and gown, if that makes sense. So it's kind of, the more I've had experience with imposter syndrome, the more I've kind of just seen the patterns very similar that come up, the cycle of imposter syndrome from beginning to getting comfortable.
That's really interesting. It's because it reminds me of, like they say, for example, interviews, they say if you're not a little bit nervous, then you don't care enough.
Absolutely.
Definitely. So it definitely resonates.
I think if you go to an interview and you're not a little bit nervous, that's telling you something.
yeah. Not sure those are people I'd even want to be in the room with, to be quite honest with you, because that level of confidence is something else. So you mentioned, like, I think you got accepted pupillage with the CPS, the Crown Prosecution Service. So tell us a little bit about why you chose for them.
So I was applying for pupillage for 5 years. First 2 years, just straight rejections, really. And then as I spent hundreds of hours researching the process, speaking to people, future pupil barristers, KCs, QCs at the time. And when I started to kind of learn and understand the process is when I started having success. So I'd gone from getting no offers to third year in, getting offers from some of the best sets across the country. And, well, getting interviews, I should say, not offers. I was getting interviews, first and second round interviews from some of the best sets in the country. And what had changed was just understanding that, like with anything, it's a process. There's things that you shouldn't be doing on a pupillage application, things that you should be doing. And in the fifth and final year, when I ended up securing pupillage, I'd gone through a lot of soul searching about, well, where do I actually want to be? So ultimately, you take pupillage where you get it. But for me, why I wanted to be at CPS was two reasons. I knew I wanted to be a criminal barrister. Half of crime is prosecuting, and the prosecuting body in the UK is the Crown Prosecution Service. So I knew whatever happened, I'm going to get amazing foundations, and I'm going to get to see aspects of the birth of a case that I may not get if I'm within chambers. And the skills that I could take from the CPS would be valuable. If the day ever came that I wanted to go to chambers, I knew it would be a valuable, they would see that I have valuable experience coming from the CPS. So that's kind of one half of it. But the other half of it to me was about the fact that being a lawyer is one hat that I wear. And as I've said in the beginning, as a digital creator and a founder, I need time for those things to live. And those things can only live at the weekends. If I was at self-employed practice and if I was at chambers, from my research, the likelihood is I'm working Saturday and Sunday. And it's not that I don't work Sunday at the CPS. It's just, it gives me enough time, and I knew it would give me enough time to have the time that I needed to breathe life into those other hats that I'm trying to wear, basically, outside of my role as a barrister. So those two things really were the training on one side, and then on the other side was also it being me being able to do the job in a way where it wasn't the only thing in my life.
It's entirely reasonable to want those things, and it's quite nice that you've set those boundaries for yourself from the outset, and it gives you a bit of variety as opposed to feeling like you've entered a track that you can't get off of.
I think for the modern lawyer, what is changing, and I don't say on behalf of my generation, but I speak on behalf of myself, but speaking to so many people of my age, I'm 30 years old now, so that there is the next generation coming in behind, it's 23, 24, but we're very close in vicinity. And what I can say is how the feeling is from what I hear from people around me is they don't just want one career anymore. Historically, you'd go into something for life. And I think where we are as a generation now is people see their careers in, not everyone, but people will potentially do 3 or 4 careers in their life now. And they don't just want to do one thing. They want to have their hands in multiple pies. And I think whatever we do, I think if something is consuming everything, it kind of over time, not in the beginning, because in the beginning when you go into something, to become good at something, you need to give it everything. So and you definitely can't do the role of a barrister half in, half out. But I think it doesn't mean that you can't be a barrister whilst also exploring other areas in life as well, if you know what I mean.
Oh, of course, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned a little bit earlier about Lexis Lab. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yeah.
Great. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that and what your motivation behind starting it was, what your objective is with it?
So Lexis Lab, the idea for it came really a few years ago, and it came off the back of when I started out on the road to the bar, there were resources, there's always been resources, but they were just all over the web. There was nothing, there was stuff for the solicitor world that was consolidated, but there wasn't anything for the world of the bar. And I spent years wasting time going down rabbit holes, getting outdated advice from people who were very far removed from the pupillage process. And the goal was, when I was on the path to pupillage, I saw how much value I got from community. People on the bar course, people in different pockets from different chambers. And the idea really was to kind of offer an online platform, community-based, for aspiring barristers. So that was kind of the inception of it. And then as it's grown and we're working with different people, the main goal for Legis Lab, as it stands currently, is to address two problems. One is on average, the low pass rate of the bar course. And we want to do that by offering a preparatory course for the bar course. There is already one in existence for the SQE. So why isn't there one for the bar? And that's kind of one half of our mission. And then the other half of the mission is to provide a comprehensive program for the pupillage process, which again is an abstract. It's piecemeal, getting pieces of information to find a path to pupillage. And although there's no recipe to getting pupillage, there's no success formula, there are things that successful candidates do. And the idea really is to bring a good team together of top people to contribute to a program that guides people through the pupillage process. So that's kind of what we want to do. And then on the side of that, we offer free advocacy classes every month. We run mooting, debating, public speaking classes, and we invite guest speakers all from across the bar, from the areas which people are less familiar with, like family law, family chambers. We're looking to bring in people from maritime law and tax and just other areas which aren't crime, commercial and civil, just to provide the aspiring barrister more insights into different areas of the profession, which can inform their decision whether they want to come in or whether they want to pursue a career as a barrister or not.
That's so nice to hear that there's something so productive and tangible being done to, you're not pulling the ladder up, you're making sure you're planting those foundations firmly in the ground for other people. It's
Absolutely.
really admirable.
Absolutely. Like as a team, we've tried to use the platform in a way where people, for example, we have a section in the community which is free resources, and what we do is we reach out to loads of people from different areas who have valuable resources, and we just aggregate them all and just provide them access. Whoever wants to come in, there's a range of videos which range from just whether it's interview, whether it's bar course stuff, whether it's just the little pieces of detail. Like one great resource is certain chambers have done thorough reviews of how they've ranked candidates going through their pupillage process. Wow. So from how they actually structure the interview, how they select the winning applications to get to interview, how then they go about what is the marking criteria for the first interview, the second interview. All this knowledge really moves the needle for someone securing a pupillage in the end. So we try to kind of offer all that, provide it all, and just give access to it all to people.
Oh, fabulous. It sounds very similar as well to me, like the civil service and the grids that they do for the various grades and so forth. Anyway, in the meantime, on that question of Legis Lab, so you state I saw on the website that you find being fearless, resilient, dynamic, and committed are all key traits towards becoming a successful barrister. Are there any specific skills other than those four that you think are characteristics, behaviours, or skills that are becoming more and more important in recent years to becoming the successful barrister?
I think there will always be traditional skills which are required to do the job. There needs to be, so to some degree, a high level of intelligence, because of the material that you're dealing with, the intelligence, not just from an IQ perspective, but in terms of the ability to look at complicated material, simplify it in your mind, navigate through it at speed, because you are, especially as a prosecutor, dealing with a high number of cases. So that, for example, that's a traditional quality that no matter how many hundreds of years go by, and no matter how much AI comes into the world, the barrister will always need that skill. Advocacy, again, that's a core, that's a fundamental skill of a barrister. I think in terms of an aspiring barrister looking to come into the profession, one of the best things that you can do, a skill as an aspiring barrister, is in the era of information, and there's, as you know, volumes and volumes of information, it's identifying valuable information from noise and information which is not moving the needle, if you know what I mean. You can read maybe 100 articles and you could spend weeks or months, depending on how much free time you have, going through these articles, thinking that every single one of them has the keys or the answers to getting pupillage. But I think a key skill you need to have as an aspiring barrister is not just researching, which you need as a barrister, but it is picking out the right information that's going to assist you on opening the door to the profession. So in the modern world, historically, maybe there was less resources and less information. I think now, because there's so much more, that is a key skill. I think networking in the modern world as well, way more relevant now, especially in the area of social media, and leveraging that in a way which is going to assist you. Because I think I look at the profession through two lenses, in the sense that, are we talking about you being an aspiring barrister, or are we talking about you being a barrister? Once you become a pupil barrister, you don't have to worry. Your chambers, your provider, they're going to make sure you are then prepared into the final product. What I focus on is getting people to the door and the skills that you need to get to that door, because they're just different. Once you're in, you're fine. It's getting through the very, very narrow bottleneck of the process. And I think to do that, it's about using all the tools that you have in the modern world to just make that process, make you one of the few that get through. As I've said, researching is important. Networking, 20 years ago, the ability just to pop up to someone on LinkedIn and say, hi, are you able to help me with this? It didn't exist. So then what were your options? Your options were finding an email in the echo chamber of the web. And as you know, a barrister's not just going to have his email up on the web, or just turning up to chambers. There's so much more competition now, but there's also so much more opportunity to leverage different things in your favor. And I think the modern aspiring lawyer, whether it's a barrister or solicitor, needs to look at the landscape in a very strategic way, like a chessboard, and just ask themselves, how can I move the pieces on this board in a way where I'm winning the game, essentially? And I always look at it through a competition lens. Park Square barristers, for example, they call their pupillage process is pupillage competition, and the award is pupillage. So that's kind of a good way, I think, for people to look at the process. You're not competing against other people, you're competing against yourself, but to get pupillage, you need to become the best version of yourself.
Is it almost like a gamification of
In
the
a way,
process?
definitely, 100%.
Yeah.
Definitely. And how everyone has a different set of cards. Everyone comes from a different background. Everyone has different privileges or unfair advantages. And it's about kind of arranging the deck of cards that you do have in a way that gets the most amount of value out of them.
That's a great way of putting it. Thank you. On the note of social media, I think that's a great opportunity to segue into that conversation. How do you maintain a presence on social media? You mentioned doing YouTube videos earlier in the scope of your role with the CPS.
So within my role at the CPS, I keep them very separate.
Of course.
Anyone in civil service knows there are civil service policies and stringent social media policies that you need to comply with. I think for me, the easiest way to comply with them is keeping all of my content separate from what I'm doing. Not straying into the realms of talking about anything which would create an issue. So I think how I go about ensuring and trying to build my social presence is really just, the main thing is everyone I feel has different platforms that they get more value from. So as you know, there are some people who are mavericks on Twitter. That is their platform of choice. And I think the first part is just kind of identifying which platform's working for you. And then the next part is doing content that you actually care about. Not just doing content for the sake of trying to grow and trying to get followers and being guided by vanity in that way. I appreciate some people look at social media either as a hobby, some people look at it as a business. For me, it's about how can I put out content that I care about, but with a goal in mind, if that makes sense. So for me, YouTube is my preferred platform. The reason I love YouTube is because filming, as you know, we're here today, there's a lot of cameras and lights, and I'm sure there's an editor in the building as well. And editing, filming, there's such a creative aspect to it, which for me, when I filmed my first YouTube video and I was learning editing and all of that, it opened a different door for me, because law is very black letter. There are these rules, you need to learn this, and you need to either perform this in an exam or you're going to use this in practice. Whereas the creative space, someone once described it to me as it's like a muscle you train. And the more I started using that muscle, it changed my perception of the way I'd look at things in life. Even the little things, like you're walking through London and you see a logo, and then you start kind of just thinking more about these things that you never once saw in your day to day. And that's kind of, for me, I appreciate I've gone a long way around answering that, but it's tied into why I do YouTube, why that's kind of my preferred channel. And in terms of building a presence, I think it's about being consistent with whatever platform you're on, putting time in weekly to think about putting out content that you care about. And it's very easy to get swallowed up by the job, the busyness of life, and not do it. But what I found is, if I do something every week, even if it's a little bit, it's growing over time.
Yeah, absolutely. And, keeping that passion for your creative projects, it's going to sustain that a lot further than the feeling of necessity.
Yeah, definitely.
No, that's brilliant. Do you think other barristers regard social media as an opportunity or as a burden?
It's a great question. I think it comes down to people's influences. There will always be in life traditionalists, people who just want to do the job and don't care about anything else, and just see it as a distraction. But I think way more so now, the modern lawyer, the way in which people are growing up now and seeing the power of social media, they understand what opportunities and doors social media can open. And I think as a barrister, as a solicitor, to grow, you should always be thinking about, whether you're at chambers, whether you're at a firm, you are more valuable to chambers, in my view, and you're more valuable to a firm with a personal brand. And that doesn't need to be a Tony Robbins, 5 million followers, but it's someone, if the firm is a business, the chambers are a business, growing your own name is facilitating in the future a way for you to attract business, whether it's for the firm, yourself, or chambers. You become, in my view, more of an asset having a brand. And I think the modern lawyer appreciates that a lot more.
Sure. And I'm going to ask you a question now, which I personally love, because it's not just about, oh, how can we help those people who are aspiring, but for people who are already barristers but want to make better use of social media, how would you advise them on that journey or initiating some sort of, creative social channel for themselves?
What I'd say is that there's two things to say. 3 things. I'm going to try and order these correctly. The first thing is that it's a skill and you need to put time into practice it. So that's the first thing. The second thing is overcoming this. Jordan Peterson has a good quote, and it's about essentially that you can never become a master if you're not willing to look like a joker, essentially. And in the beginning, when you do something, you're not great at it. So it's becoming and accepting putting out content which isn't polished, isn't the best, isn't going to be like other people with 1 million subscribers, or do you know what I mean? And the journey to what I call finding your voice, whether it's through photos on Instagram, videos on YouTube, requires you to be okay with the evolution of how that content will become over time. So that's kind of the second thing is getting over this hump of what are people going to think about me, because that is one of the biggest brick walls, if I can,
Please do.
to getting there. And then I'd say finally, so you've got the skills, you kind of getting over this thing is being open to experimenting, because you might start out on, let's say, Instagram, and you've been doing it for a year and you don't find that it's actually going anywhere. So then thinking, okay, how can I think outside the box, and how can I leverage more modern or different channels to grow my content? And I think those 3 combined will help anyone kind of just get on the road to doing it. The last thing I'd say is just do it. Put it out, however it looks. You can delete it in the future if you don't like it. Yes, it will always be on the internet, but at the end of the day, I think coming out of this spotlight where you think the whole world's looking at you, there is millions of pieces of content being uploaded onto the internet every single day. Yours is the needle head, not even the needle, in a haystack of content. So when you kind of see it like that and just think, well, it's not this big world career defining thing, it's taking more of a playful attitude towards it and looking at it optimistically of how can it change your life. And for me, speaking personally, YouTube has completely changed my life. And not because it's given me anything. I'm very small YouTuber. I've got like 7,000 subscribers and just growing the channel. But it's changed my life in the sense of the people I've met, the people that have reached out to me, the impact I've had on, since I've been helping aspiring barristers for 2021, the amount of people that I've been able to help. And it's given me a real deep sense of fulfillment. I can't put it into words, and I would have never had that had I not made that first video.
That's fantastic. It sounds to me like the word that comes to mind is humbling, you have to be humble to start it in the first place, but it can be humbling even in its success.
Definitely.
Yeah.
100%. And it doesn't, as I said, it doesn't need to be this
Yeah.
big thing. It can just be a very little thing, but it can make a big impact.
Great. No, thanks for sharing your thoughts on that.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. The little bit of a side swerve now. We've got 8th of March coming up for International Women's Day. We've seen in recent years there's been an uptick in the number of women versus men being called to the bar, but obviously there's a reasonable number. This is in terms of self-employed barristers who are, the percentage still mostly stays the same, around 34 to 35% of women. What messages, I'm curious as to whether or not you spot any patterns or trends in terms of women who might come to you as aspiring barristers versus men or people who identify other than women. And what sort of message of advice and perhaps confidence that you'd like to convey with that?
Well, I think the first thing to say is that you can absolutely, definitely have a career at the bar as a mother, as a carer. I have colleagues who have 1-year-olds who are having a career at the bar. But I hear what you say about the statistics and numbers, and I think there's a difference between mums or carers potentially being called to the bar and starting a career and then potentially leaving. And I'm conscious and live to the fact that that does exist. And I think the thing I would say from speaking with mothers and people who are juggling the demands of the job are that I speak to some that have said it's almost incompatible with to do the job being a mum. But they qualify that by saying at a certain set. And that's not to cast aspersions on any sets. It's just simply to say that, like with any business, I think the key is doing your homework, doing your research, and speaking to members of chambers if you are a mum with a child or a family and you want to do the job. It's absolutely doable. You just need to find the right home for you. And I think that goes into speaking to the women at that chambers and having honest conversations with them about if you are looking to join and what life would look like. So definitely don't be demotivated about whether or not it's doable. It is definitely doable. And then also to consider that there are other ways in which the job can be done outside of the self-employed bar. I meet a lot of mums who work for the local council, and there is the employed bar. Everyone seems to forget about everyone forgets about the employed bar, and that is, from my experience, although I'm not a mother and I'm not, I don't have a family, speaking to different people, there are many other pockets, whether it's loads of different government agencies that they work for, and they are able to balance the demands of being a mother with the demands of the job. So I think there's, to summarize that, there are picking the right sets, and then they're also considering different organizations at the employed bar that might be a better fit depending on what you want to do.
No, and I love that because it's advice that works regardless of who you are. It's all about, like what you said about finding the right home for yourself, really resonates, I think.
It's hard to find as well. I think in any job, finding the right career is a journey. And I think sometimes it's sad because what can happen is someone goes to a set of chambers and they say, hey, I'm leaving the profession, this job can't be done. And before they've gone and really explored or tried to find the home, if you know what I mean.
No, totally.
Yeah.
Totally. No, thank you for that. It's always, quite frankly, nice to hear a man's opinion on International Women's Day. You know, like I said earlier to you when we were talking off camera, you don't want it to be quite such an echo chamber.
Yeah.
No, so I appreciate your input on that
Oh,
one.
I've tried to offer my opinion on it, but I can appreciate I don't have all the answers.
No one does. Otherwise, we wouldn't be asking these questions. That's for sure. So a little bit of a sort of step change now, if you don't mind. I want to talk to you about AI. Here at Nexis, we say that the barrister lawyer won't be replaced by AI, but the lawyer or barrister with AI will replace the lawyer barrister.
It's a really good way of articulating it, yeah.
Oh, great. Oh, I'm glad you approve. So, first of all, do you use any AI tools? Which tools do you use? How do you use them? How are they benefiting you or challenging you, perhaps?
Well, for me, I use a lot of AI tools, but in my personal capacity. Working for the civil service, AI tools would have to be approved by the departments. I know that AI is being explored and there is definitely an intention across loads of government agencies to be using it and incorporating it, and there's a plan. I think with private law firms, many of them are already using it in many different ways. Me personally, I use it in my creator life. I use it as a founder. How I use it in my day-to-day, whether it's assisting with script structure for YouTube, whether it's voice overs or we use it in part of our CRM for our business, and loads of different ways in which it just assists the day-to-day grind of life. I think the way in which the world is going, everyone, especially the younger generation, are using it to great effect in so many different ways. And if you don't put the time into I think it's almost, there's part of learning the skill and then there's the habit, there's the getting into the habit of using it. And they're two challenges in themselves. Some people, they like, when you asked me before about the traditional lawyer and social media, the traditionalists may reject social media, they may reject AI, but I'm completely in agreement with your view, is that the barrister using AI will eventually replace the one that's not. And there are so many ways in which it can be used. I've sat with a KC recently following a trial at Southwark Crown Court, and we spent hours after that trial discussing, providing his input in how he thinks it's going to impact the bar. And just, if I was to give an example, the more mainstream way in which we know AI is helping is with disclosure, is being able to have a real impact on what is a high human capital task, disclosure, taking, especially at big firms, double-digit numbers to go through hundreds of thousands of documents, spending hours and hours and hours of billable time, whereas you can use a machine to give it correct input into the algorithm and it's able to identify certain things. That's how we know it's being used with great effect. But if I was to give you a bit more nuance in the sense of how I can see it is going to have an impact, I can't speak for the family bar, I can't speak for the commercial bar or the civil bar, but within the world of crime, I see it having so many uses from the outset of, if I just take you through the lineage of, or the process of preparing a case, from legal research to identifying the right cases to case reviews, where it can be integrated into essentially looking at hundreds of pages of information and producing a summary, to then a barrister having inputted the case review is then able to draft. And I always say it with this, through this lens, is you have to be careful in not over relying on it. It's there, as we've said, as inspiration to provide a draft, but can make a huge difference with giving an opening speech, giving a closing speech. Even if you don't use 80% of it, that 20% can make a big difference. Having back and forward exchanges with the AI to preparing questions for a certain case, and you'll be amazed what it spits out. And I think it will eventually add tremendous value to across professions. But in the world of the bar, time, as you know, is of the essence. And the greatest gift that AI will give to the profession is efficiency. People will start doing things in a much more efficient way, and it will give, the reason why it will be undeniable, because it will give a profession of people who have very limited time more time back. And when that starts to happen, then you can't ignore it at that point. I know there's always whispers and people who say, well, what happens if the AI misses that in the disclosure and that leads to a miscarriage of justice? And I hear that, but that could equally happen with human error.
Yeah.
So it's a balancing act in the end. And I think the way in which I would use it in the future is the last check is always being done by a human actor. And there's a danger of over-relying on it. But as long as there are checks and balances in place, I think it's going to add tremendous value.
Absolutely. And we've heard a lot of feedback from barristers who have clients who have commented that they would like to know and be reassured that the judgments they're receiving are written by their advocate. One of the things that we fall back on is the idea that AI is there to uphold your judgment, as opposed to your judgment is not there to uphold the AI.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, just part of your toolkit, really.
Yeah, well, exactly. It's almost like you look at a way more advanced version, but before we transitioned to Microsoft Word, you'd have people writing things out on typewriters, writing things by hand, and then on a minor level, you would then get Microsoft Word, and then it would be able to underline something in red for you to spell check it. And now this is just the next huge leap from where we were to where we're heading.
Yeah. You still always have to check that you haven't got the US spelling on. That's the thing.
Yeah, the Z. So the Z's the giveaway.
Yeah, I know, right? Control F. That's brilliant. It's pretty much everything that we had slated to chat about. But is there anything else that you want to talk about in the frame of this conversation about the future of the bar?
I think there's always a lot of scaremongering going on. And we are, as a society, in such a privileged place to be. And if you look back when the internet first came to be, there was this hysteria around it as well. But ultimately, with the internet, for example, a lot of good has come out of it and a lot of bad has come out of it. And there will always be this double-edged sword. And I'm sure AI is going to be no different. It's going to go on a process of development. There's going to need to be ethical implementations to ensure that it's not being used in the wrong kind of way. But I think people should be excited as well about the potential that it's going to bring for justice, for assisting, and the impact that will have on elevating the profession. And I think sometimes there can be too much of a negative conversation around change. And that's what it is. It's change, it's coming. And whether or not you get on board, that train's going and it's moving out of the station. So yeah. I think for the new lawyer, I would really advocate getting involved, beginning to learn the skill. It will separate you from the pack. And when the day comes, and it will come, where it's undeniable that AI is here to stay, you will now be looked to as oracles of AI for your input. And I think that's gonna be a separator.
Adaptability.
Definitely, 100%.
Brilliant. Okay, well, Taz, thank you so much
Thanks
for
for
joining
having
us
me.
today. It's been a really interesting discussion.
Yeah, no,
I
I
hope
really
you've
enjoyed it. Definitely.
Great.
Definitely. Thanks for having me.